Yo, what is up, YouTube? So in this video, I want to talk a little bit about why I decided to get the Honda Civic Type R. A lot of people over the years have asked me, hey, what was the decision-making process like? Why is this car so special to you and so meaningful? And so I want to talk about that in this video. But before I do that, I want to give you guys just a little bit of background and history. So growing up in Oregon, I actually used to live next to a guy who owned an Integra Type R. It was a white version and it was super clean, well-maintained and everything else. And I remember just sitting outside waiting for the school bus to arrive. Every time he would open his garage and back out and drive to work. It was just the most cleanest, most beautiful sound that I've ever heard. And having done my research, the internet was still kind of growing back then, but doing a little bit of research online, I knew that this was a rare, exclusive car that not only looked good but also performed really well on the track. And so that was sort of the first car that really got me into, performance cars. And I knew that this was a car that I wanted to have someday. And so fast forward, got my driver's license, and, the first car that I actually owned was a Honda Del Sol. I remember, learning stick on my friend's Honda Prelude gave me the desire and motivation to get a stick shift. Automatics to me back then and still today are pretty boring and not very engaging. And so I wanted to get a cheap car that I could practice with. And the 1994 Honda Del Sol, which back then wasn't a lot of power. It wasn't obviously a performance car, but it was within my budget, and it was a car that was fun to drive. And so that's what kind of got me on this journey of owning Hondas ever since the Honda Del Sol. I've owned, after that I had the RXX Type S, which I loved. I've also owned Civics, Honda Fits, Honda S2000s, and then of course now the Honda Civic Type R. And so actually, if you think about it, my entire history of owning vehicles has always been Honda. I've always had a great experience with them. They've never really broken down on me, never really had any major issues. And so I've just stuck with what I've been comfortable with. When Honda finally announced that, hey, they were bringing back the Honda Civic Type R, I knew I had to get one. And so back in 2017, when they made that announcement, I started to do my homework. I started to call up dealerships and ask them, when are you guys going to get them in? Can I put my name and put in a deposit to secure one of the first units to arrive in the States? And so I think I covered or called 20 to 30 different dealerships all across the West Coast. And I even went as far as the Midwest, Utah and Colorado and Texas. I was willing to drive basically to go pick up the car or have it delivered. And so finally I got pretty lucky and found a dealership in Utah. Shout out to Stephen Wade Honda for hooking me up. And they were willing to sell me a Honda Civic Type R, one of the first units that they would receive at MSRP. And back then this was a super rare thing because everyone wanted these things, and so the demand was skyrocketing for these Type Rs. And I think most of the dealerships that I had called in California, in Oregon, in Washington were planning to mark up the car $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, and I just wasn't willing to do that. But Stephen Wade was willing to give it to me for MSRP. And so I put my deposit down, and when it finally got delivered to their dealership, they sent me some photos and they asked me, hey, how do you want to take delivery of this? And I thought about it and I was like, do I really want to drive a brand new car from Utah all the way to California? It's going to be a long trip. And so I said, let's just have it delivered. And so they delivered it to my place, and ever since then I've just enjoyed my experience owning this car. It's brought me a lot of satisfaction. It's never given me any issues. And the 5 reasons why I wanted to get the Civic Type R, in addition to kind of the story I shared in the beginning of the video, is kind of 5 different reasons, right? And so the first one for me, I've always liked performance cars. Hondas, I think, always have this racing DNA sort of within their vehicles, and especially with the Honda S2000, which I still regret to this day selling. That was one of the most fun cars I've ever owned. I knew that Type Rs would still embody that DNA and that fun factor into their vehicles, and the Honda Civic Type R is no different, right? It's got, I think 306 horsepower, over 300 pounds of torque. It's still a front wheel drive vehicle, but it handles supremely well. I haven't taken this car onto the track yet, but whenever I take it onto the highway or just gun it off on an off-ramp, there's just a tremendous amount of thrill that comes with it. The performance isn't going to blow your mind, especially if you've driven European supercars or GTRs or anything like that. It's not that kind of performance, but I think it's just a very well balanced vehicle that does everything well. It's also got an LSD limited slip differential, and the car doesn't weigh that much, and so you're able to just go and zoom and just have a great time. It's also got 3 different modes. Obviously, if you guys haven't done the research, it's got the comfort mode, it's got sport, I believe, and then R plus, which is kind of the racing format. And so I've pretty much kept this car in stock format and haven't really modified or enhanced anything or added any add-ons, which, to me, it's to each their own. But for me, I've always enjoyed keeping a lot of my car stock just to really enjoy the purity and the way that it was designed from the factory. So that's the first reason. The second reason, the aesthetics. For me, I love the way that it looks. I know that when it first came out, a lot of people kind of equated it to like a Transformer or like a Gundam because it had all these sharp edges and kind of these weird designs. It just looked a little bit too boy racerish. But for me, I love it. I still obviously prefer kind of the old Integra type look, but I know this is more of a modern day design and take on the Type R vehicle. So, just the way it looks, both inside the car, the way everything is kind of laid out, even though it's got, fake carbon fiber inserts throughout the vehicle, it still looks good. It still looks very clean. The bucket seats are super comfortable, and they also perform very well. And then of course the exterior, the giant wing in the back, it's got obviously the front lips and a couple other parts that make it look pretty aggressive. Some people might not like it. For me, I enjoy it. Yeah, what can I say about the aesthetics? It looks fine to me. The exclusivity is also another factor. I know that Honda didn't make a whole lot of these, and I know at some point they're going to discontinue making these, but the fact that the Honda Civic Type R is still pretty rare, and it's hard to find, I think is also just another reason, because you don't really see a whole lot on the road. Here in California and the Bay, I do see them from time to time. I don't see a whole lot of the metal metallic color, which is the one I have. I see a lot of championship white colors. I see a lot of black and red, but not a whole lot in the color that I picked up, which wasn't my first choice, to be honest. I also wanted a championship white, but this was probably, the gunmetal color was probably my second choice. Every Type R has the edition number labeled onto the gearbox, so that's just another way of kind of distinguishing yours from everyone else's. The fourth reason that I have for why I decided to pick up the Type R is just the value, man. It's got great value for what I paid for it. I think I paid $34,000 back in 2017. It's just got a lot of utility. Obviously, it's got 4 doors. You can take 4 people around. It's got plenty of trunk space, so you could put in a golf bag in it. You can put in a bunch of groceries from your Costco runs or whatever it is that you need. MPG is also pretty solid. On average on the highway, I get about 27, 28. On the city driving, I get mostly like 20, 24, 25. It's also pretty practical, right? You can take it anywhere. I've also driven this car down for long drives. I've got about 12,000 miles on it over a period of 3 to 4 years. So that's not a whole lot of driving on this car. And so this is mostly a fun car for me and more of a weekend car, but it still does everything well. And it's just a great, well-balanced vehicle. The last reason I want to share with you guys is also just the reliability. I mean, it's a freaking Honda, man. Hondas, Toyotas, they pretty much never break down. I know Honda reliability has suffered a little bit in more recent years, or other competitors have caught up, like Hyundai and a few other import brands, but Hondas are still rock solid reliable. For this car, I've only had to do oil changes with synthetic every 6 months. The tires are going to wear out a little bit more quickly. I did have a little incident where I ignored my low tire pressure warning, and the tires popped on the middle of the highway, and I had to take it to a gas station where I had to get the car towed and get the front tires replaced. But this was around 9,000, 10,000 miles. And so I probably should have been a little bit more aware of checking the tires and making sure that I'm listening and watching the tire pressure warnings. So that's something that I messed up, and something that I'm paying a lot more attention to moving forward. But yeah, just the overall reliability has been super, man. No issues, oil changes pretty much, and that's been pretty much it. That's been my experience with the car, and those are some of the reasons why I decided to buy the Type R. I love this car. I don't know how much longer I'm going to keep it. Obviously, I'd love to upgrade to an NSX at some point, but the price per value that you get from a Type R versus an NSX, I don't know if it's going to be that worth it. Anyways, those were some of the reasons why I decided to get the Type R. For those of you guys that own this car today, what were some of your reasons you decided to buy this. And for those of you guys that are considering a Type R, hopefully this video has given you a little bit more insight into what it's like to own a Type R. And yeah, I highly recommend getting one if you can. I think there's not a whole lot of other competitors out there in the market today that can kind of compete with all the different things that this car kind of brings to the table. And so that's all I've got for this video. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.